And it's my great pleasure to welcome Michelle Pinheiro, Head of Enterprise Data Governance at ANZ. Michelle is responsible for the data ethics framework and embedding it across her organisation. Welcome, Michelle.
Pleasure to be here.
Now, Michelle, you're also chair of TDI.
Yes, TDI is a community of practice of member organisations, and our purpose is to drive an uplift in data governance maturity with a particular focus on data ethics inside our member organisations. So we support each other and create content to support, in particular, boards and senior executives around driving those agendas.
Obviously, it's been somewhat turbulent times recently, and data has been put right at the forefront. How has that changed for you?
Well, things certainly haven't slowed down. They have accelerated. We have had to lean into a lot of new reactive initiatives related to COVID-19 with regards to having access to data to help to respond to the situation for our customers in my organisation. How data governance has helped to do that is really leaning into helping to point where the right data is. It's not just having access to the data, but it's how to get the right insights out. And there are a lot of business rules in an organisation of how to get the right insights out of data. And so making that knowledge public inside the analytical world is really, really important.
How should we be approaching data ethics right now?
There is a lot of focus across a lot of industries around artificial intelligence. And there's a lot of algorithms and technology being written around how to uncover bias and sort of themes in data ethics. But really, it's much more fundamental than that. It really comes back to corporate governance. So ethics is not new for corporate governance. A lot of organisations have an ethical code of conduct. Ethics is part of the OECD corporate governance principles. So organisations are quite experienced at setting ethical codes of conduct. Data ethics is an extension of that. Data ethics is not a manifesto inside the data world. For lawyers, it should be an extension of the ethical code of conduct and the values of an organisation. I would not recommend going out and Googling or copying other ethical principles of other organisations around the world. Your data ethics principles, which is where you should start on data ethics, should be really tied to the values of your organisation. And there's a lot of areas that are quite grey, and your data ethics principles help set your organisation to determine for you what is right and what is wrong.
But it has to be right for your organisation.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's got a lot to do with the primary purpose of your organisation. As an example, if you are an organisation that, as part of your primary purpose, you track the movements of your customers, and that's what your customers expect of you, and that's what they sign up for, then that's okay. But if you are an organisation that does not do that, but you have access to location data about your customers, then perhaps it's not so ethical to be piecing that all together and doing location monitoring. That is a topic that we should be really exploring across all industries around surveillance and what is a test for when you could be accidentally conducting surveillance on people.
Can you tell us a bit more about that?
There's the ability to conduct surveillance through data.
Yeah.
And that is new because there is more data. There's more IoT devices being able to capture all of that data, and there's more sophisticated technology to be able to piece all of that together. What's really interesting is that you can justify outcomes from surveillance data in terms of aggregated insights around where people congregate or where people move to, and it's all aggregated and anonymous and quite safe. But how did you get to that point? Did you actually have to create a database of surveillance monitoring on a lot of people to be able to get to that point? I think that's really interesting, and I think that's where it's really grey. And it's the heart of ethics. Did you use a person as a means to an end?
Sure.
The ends might be okay, but the means in which you got there may not be okay.
Could be questionable.
Yeah.
The repurposing of data that you had initial permission to use for a single purpose.
Yes.
and then potentially using that data for an altogether separate purpose.
Yes. That's where ethical governance really comes in. So if you have consent and if you have transparency, you're able to do whatever the customer expects of you. Firstly, you have to really think about, is my use of this data, is this use case connected to my primary purpose or is it secondary purpose? Yeah. The safest way is to get consent from the people that you have their data on and be really transparent. And sometimes that may not be desired. You may not want to get consent. And so therefore you actually really have to limit and be within the boundaries of what the expectations of those people are. I'm really in favour of educating data workers around what is that test, rather than educating everybody on the concepts of data ethics and the philosophy of it.
Yes.
It's much easier for people to grasp
in a tangible sense.
It's something very tangible. Am I going to pass or am I not going to pass? I'm looking to utilise that concept of tests across a lot of themes in data ethics. So surveillance is just one of them.
Yeah.
Another thing that is not new is the concept of an ethical dilemma. And an ethical dilemma is when you have a conflict between two values in an organisation. An ethical dilemma is not just making an ethical business decision. It's when you are actually conflicted. And I think a great example of that I see emerging is in the cyber world, where we are conflicted by our value of being able to protect our information, protect our organisation, the sustainability of the organisation, certainly against more and more sophisticated threats, versus the concept of monitoring employees for insider threat. So there's a conflict there between the privacy of employees and the protection of the organisation. But a balance has to be sought. And if you start really delving into the world of insider threat, that gets very close to behavioural monitoring of employees. And employees have rights, not just employees, but as individuals. And behavioural monitoring is the theme that was found to be quite alarming in the Cambridge Analytica scandal. Behavioural monitoring is something that is a big no-no in GDPR. So I think that in organisations, those who are responsible for ethical governance of data really need to look into that space. And my view of that is that there is a balance that needs to be struck there. I'm not a no shop. I absolutely see the need for the safety of data and the protection of data, but we have to balance that out against the rights of the individual.
Is data ethics confined to AI? Is that where we should be focused?
Well, I think AI is a great topic for data ethics because it's a bit of an enigma. But most organisations aren't really sophisticated with AI yet. I think a lot of organisations would be really happy if they just had a lot more automated decisioning. And automated decisioning is not AI. In creating automated decisions, there's a lot of themes in data ethics, and one of them is around agency. When you create a cascading effect of automated decisions in a process, you must give a human the ability to challenge. So one bad automated decision can make them have a bad day. A cascading effect of automated decisions can impact their lives. If you have a bad automated decision, say perhaps in Google Maps, you get sent down the wrong street and you're really annoyed.
I think we've all been there.
That's really right. Then you take another example, which is a really famous example of robo-debt. Automated decisioning, send it out. And now we're still talking about that years later and the financial and emotional impact that has had on people. It did not take in the human factor. It did not treat people like humans. People themselves need to be not treated like a number or just a vehicle that's sent through automated decisions in your organisation. They need to have the right to challenge, and they need to understand how that decision is made about them. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done around the data and a lot of thinking, particularly around human-centred design in automated decisioning. And so that's a place to start. I know a lot of people are jumping into AI and ethics for AI. There's a lot of foundational work that needs to be done before that.
No, I feel like there's been this whole journey of people now looking back at the fundamental cornerstone of
Absolutely.
data governance. And
Yes.
we've seen a full circle
Yes.
come around to people still refocused on
Yes.
how do we get this right?
Yes,
You know?
absolutely. And it's not about arresting bad behaviour. I see very little, in fact, no nefarious intentions around data. It's just an excitement around, wow, I've got this really great insight. Wow, I can do this. But there needs to be a pause and a level of maturity to say, yeah, that's really great, but that's not okay.
Thank you so much for joining us, Michelle. Really appreciate your time.
Quite all right. Pleasure to be here.